Hi, we're Richard and Jackie from Early Retirement Wanderlust, and if you've seen any of our previous videos from the last few weeks, you'll know that we've just returned home from a 5-week skiing trip in our VW campervan.
And what we want to do in this video is to go through some of our costs for that trip and the steps that we took to try and keep those costs under control.
So we did have the most wonderful 5-week road trip skiing from our VW campervan. It wasn't without its little issues this time. I ended up not being able to ski for 12 days because I had a chest infection, and we did end up having to have the windscreen replaced on the VW because we got a chip in it which turned into a great big crack no more than 10 miles south of Calais.
Now, if we are going to be really honest, you can't include the word skiing and budget in the same sentence, or rarely. There are certain things to do with skiing holidays that are going to be really expensive that you cannot avoid. So for instance, you can't ski without a lift pass, and that is just a fixed price that is going to really challenge the budget. But what we want to do in this video is to go through everything that we spent on our 5-week trip and show you the ways that we have perhaps tried to tweak things to bring things in a little bit more on budget or just a little bit more economical.
We have talked quite a lot on the channel about the fact that we look at our travels in two ways. Most of the time when we go away in our VW campervan, we talk about the fact that we are travelling, we are just living our normal day-to-day lives, but we are living it out of the campervan. And we have a budget and we try to stick to it as much as possible. And then we also talk about the fact that just occasionally we will declare part of our travels as a holiday. So our children joined us for a week while we were skiing, and we did rent an apartment in Art 1950, and we definitely declared that part of the trip as a holiday, and the budget went out the window, so to speak. But we had a wonderful time with the children, and sometimes we're not prepared to compromise on that. We want to just have quality time with our family, but then we went back to travelling for the last 3 weeks.
So what we want to do in this video is to go through some of the key areas where we incurred costs and try and look at the ways that we tried to minimize those costs, or at least make sure that we got best value for our spend. So the first expense that we incurred was actually getting to the Alps, and for us it was getting to the French Alps. And I'll put a link to a video that we did previously where we compared our costs in terms of driving to the Alps with the kids' cost of flying and transferring. And there were a few interesting things that came out of that.
For us, the journey cost us about £780 return to include the ferries, the petrol and the toll, which was actually pretty good value. The kids got their flights at a bargain, so they did get to the French Alps a little bit cheaper than it cost us to get there, but they didn't have to bring any skis and boots with them because they hire those in the village. So I think the £780 that we paid was really good value, definitely cheaper than if you were particularly in high season to fly.
And for us, our accommodation was literally quite on our back, really, because we need the campervan in order to be able to live economically in the valley for an extended period of time. So when you spread that cost over the 4 or 5 weeks that we were out in France, it's actually a really economical way. Not quite sure whether it would work just for the week, and I'm not quite sure whether I could cope with the drive there and back in the week, but it does work for some people.
By far the biggest expense, and there is absolutely no avoiding it, is that you have to have a lift pass to get up on the mountains to be able to ski. We went for a season pass because we potentially had 28 days where we could ski. That's the maximum we could have skiing with our insurance. The lift passes were €820 each. Once I checked our bank account, we paid £1,380 in English money between us for the lift passes, but that gave us access to 28 days skiing.
I'm just sitting here sweating wondering how Jackie can keep all of those figures in her head, because I actually have to write them down. Les Arcs is a really economical season pass, and that is one of the reasons why we chose to go there. If you look at the ski areas that are pretty close to Les Arcs, so Val d'Isère, their season pass is just over the €1,000 mark, so it's 1,090, and the Three Valleys is anywhere between €1,271 and an astonishing €1,550. euros for the season pass. So you can see by choosing Les Arcs, it's an area that we know, it's an area that we'll come on to and talk about how economical the campsites are, but also it just made it an absolute no-brainer in terms of the value of the season pass. So in terms of accommodation, there is a whole range of accommodation that you could choose to go for. And it's very much on a spectrum from the most exclusive catered chalets that we've never, ever been able to afford to do, all the way down through self-catering, through campsite accommodation, and then accommodation on airs. But that's not really workable for us.
No, we haven't got any onboard facilities, and I think it would be quite cold not having electric hookup, which some of the airs don't provide. So we went for campsite accommodation for most of our trip, which is really good value at just over £25 per day. We'll come to the costs of the apartment that we hired and the campsite costs for the 23 nights that we were there later in the video.
But in terms of keeping the costs down when we were with the kids, we have always done self-catering, and it's something that we really enjoy because it's a time to get together as a family. As a family, we like cooking and we like just sitting around and chewing the fat, and it just seems to work for us.
Also a bargain because the kids wanted to ski the first couple of weeks in January, which is low season. So we had the cheapest accommodation that you could get. The costs just spiral up and up the further you go into the ski season.
And one thing linked with the accommodation, we had a really nice contrast. When we were with the kids in ARC 1950, we were in a ski-in, ski-out accommodation. Whereas when we were looking to stay for a longer period of time, we stayed down in the valley. And in reality, the further you move away from the slopes, the cheaper the accommodation gets. So if you are happy to put up with the inconvenience, and we didn't really see it as an inconvenience not being ski in, ski out, then you can actually make some savings there.
No, we quite enjoyed it actually. From the campsite, it's about a 15-minute walk to the funicular train that takes you up to the resort. If you're lucky and you time it well, you are straight on the train, and that's another 10 minutes up. So from the campsite to actually getting on the first lift on the slopes can be 25 minutes, half an hour, and then you're off skiing.
Yeah, and it worked really well for us because, to be honest, when we were skiing with the kids from first lift till last lift in a ski-in, ski-out accommodation, there was no moment of rest, and it just nearly broke us. Whereas when we're down in the campsite, we can have a leisurely start and it just feels a little bit more our pace.
A cost that we didn't have to incur this year is having to hire ski equipment. Every other year that we've skied, we've had to hire our skis and our boots and poles. But we made the decision last year that we would buy them because we were skiing for 7 weeks. And actually, it was only a couple of £100 more to buy our own equipment than to hire it for that length of time.
And we knew that we were going to be committing to skiing in the long term over the next few years. So paying out anything upwards of £100 a week for rental of ski gear just didn't work out. So hopefully from next year we're definitely going to be in profit, and we love our ski gear. It's not wearing out, so it's just going to last us for years.
Yeah, we didn't go for anything fancy dancy and posh. We just went for some really good intermediate ski equipment, and it's done us fantastically. Something that we had to change for our European road trip this time is our phone contracts. EE used to be £25 per month, and we could use all of our normal data and minutes at ringing and texts. But they changed that in December, which was a bit of a shock. So we did find a different solution. I did lots of research and asked on different forums, and we've stayed with EE. We have had to up our contract, so mine is now £26 a month, I think. It went up from £18 a month. But we could then have European roaming as part of that contract. So actually, I think that's a bit of a bonus for us. We've got another 6-week trip planned in May. We've got another trip planned to the Alps in September. So we will get use out of paying more for the contract, but getting our European roaming. And actually, it also includes free Netflix. So we were paying £5 a month for Netflix. If I take that off, I'm only paying £21. So it's only £3 a month more. And we get all our European roaming in there now.
It was a really big discussion point on the campsite, and everyone seemed to be finding their own way through it. Interestingly, the Starlink solution seemed to be quite popular on the campsite this year that we didn't realise. And then some people were also buying local SIM cards and running them through routers in their vans. So there are loads of different options, but this one just seems to work for us.
It did. It worked really well. And finally, we've come to probably our budgeting of our spending money for the 5 weeks. We took out €1,200 in cash with us, which was to cover all of our food and drink costs and any sort of sundries that came up. And that did last us, actually. We did really well. I think we only ran out of money in perhaps the last couple of days.
And we are really old school, so cash is king. So we kept to a €30 budget, and we had little envelopes where every day we took out our €30. And the fact that you've got that cash in your pocket just gives you a really good idea of how the spend is going over the course of the day. And we did have quite a few rollover days, didn't we?
Yeah, €30 is actually more than we needed. We spent obviously more than that when we were with the children, because we did eat out and drink out on the mountain more, and we spent quite a lot less than that when we were on our own. But yeah, the cash lasted us pretty well, and that included having to pay €107 to the window replacement people for the VW van.
So we're going to try now and do some of our top tip practical, they might seem really simple ways, but when they are all added together, they are just really good ways of keeping your ski trip on budget. When we were with the kids, I was the breakfast fairy, so I used to go out and get the bread in the morning and get all the croissants and whatever the kids wanted for breakfast. We can't sustain that on the budget that we were trying to do, so we just made sure that we had simple breakfasts in the van that kept us going throughout the morning, but it was not too expensive, because in reality, living off croissants every morning is probably not the healthiest thing for us.
No, we had porridge a lot and breakfast cereal and yoghurt and fruit quite a lot, so that kept the costs down. And then the next way of keeping costs down is that we tended to take packed lunches onto the mountains, particularly when we were skiing from the van. It's just really simple, taking up our sandwiches. We did discover a love of taking the odd croissant with cheese and different saucissons in it, because it was a little bit softer than taking French bread. But yeah, we had packed lunches on the mountains most days. We've got our favourite little picnic spots, and some of those spots included having little vending machines for a coffee.
So talking of coffees, we were not averse to having our little treats on the mountain, but our little treats, we just had to moderate them. So by taking a picnic lunch, we definitely didn't have to have full meals on the mountain, but we had a little bit of money then to make sure that we could go and treat ourselves and have a cafe experience, but just have a cheap coffee or a chocolate.
We did discover where the cheapest cafes were over the few weeks that we were there. Likewise, with having a bit of a treat if we wanted a beer. We did find one bar which was right at the other side of the mountain at PC Villandry. It probably took an hour's skiing to get there, but it did a happy hour 3 till 4 where you could get 2 beers for €9. So we did do that a couple of days. Felt like we were having a nice treat.
And I suppose it comes back to that mindset, and it's really difficult because everyone, or pretty much everyone in a ski resort, is on holiday and on holiday for the week. So we found that when we were out there for a longer period of time, we were just surrounded by people who were constantly eating out and having beers and wine and coffees. And that's not sustainable if you are skiing for an extended period of time, or it certainly isn't on our budget. So it was really difficult because lots of people are there on holiday because of the nature of the sporting activity, but it's something that we had to compromise on.
Even when we were out 1950 with the children, we only actually ate out one night. We had a meal for Molly's birthday. Apart from that, we cooked in the apartment, mainly because we actually as a family really enjoy just the process of sitting down and cooking a meal. It's an open plan kitchen. We all took turns cooking, and we had planned our own little meals that we wanted to cook for each other. And actually our son Luke is an amazing cook, so he does want us to show some of the meals that he cooked.
And they were pretty impressive. While we are doing that, I've just remembered that actually we saved quite a bit of money by buying all of our food down in the valley and away from the village, because if you are up in the mountains and you have to buy locally from the stores, there is a cost, and the cost increases because they've got to get those goods up the mountain. So we did the big family shop at the start of the week. We were shopping to the menu that Luke and the kids had prepared, and we were pretty stocked up for the whole week when we were in 1950.
I think we ate like royalty, actually. We had some fantastic meals. We took our fondue pot, so we had a really nice fondue night with lots of different cold meats. We had a tartiflette night, so Luke cooked the most gorgeous tartiflette, which is a cheesy potato, onion, bacon pot of loveliness.
One of the things that the kids are absolutely obsessed about on a ski holiday is the roti chicken and the potatoes, and we absolutely bombed out on that. We could not source it anywhere. So was one of our treats, we decided that we'd get some good old French beef and had a roast beef dinner, which again, you're in this beautiful ski resort, and we just about managed to get a roast beef dinner for 6 of us together, and it worked out quite reasonable if you were comparing that to actually having to buy that out in a restaurant.
In sharp contrast, when we are back down in the valley and we are living out of the campervan, the campsite is actually opposite a Super U supermarket, and we would go every day or two and just stock up on nice, cheap and cheerful, healthy meals. We quite liked having different pasta dishes with their fresh pastas, and I think we had spaghetti bolognese about 4 times, because when I was feeling poorly, that was one of the things I really fancied.
And, in the campervan, we've only got 2 burners, but we do get quite creative in what we cook. The bolognese thing is you can still batch cook. So we found that was really useful. So we'd make a huge pot of bolognese, and then we could freeze it for the next few days and come back to that. And it's just another way of making the pennies just go that little bit further when you're in resort.
I am going to hold my hands up, admit, the last couple of days when we were skiing, because I had my 12 days where I couldn't go on the mountain, we did treat ourselves to a couple of really, really nice mountain meals. The Folie Douce, which is actually more renowned for its après-ski and its lively atmosphere, does really gorgeous cafeteria food, and with our season pass, or if you have an essential pass, you can get one meal for €17 where it's a proper cooked lunch. I had roast ham with really nice creamy mashed potatoes and a plate of fresh veg and a glass of wine for €17. Really, really good value. So we did treat ourselves to that, and we did treat ourselves to a last afternoon on the mountain where we had some pink wine and a pizza.
However, contrary to all of that, we actually found that over the course of this ski trip, we didn't drink half as much as we expected to, or perhaps we had done on previous ski trips. I think we've been pretty good.
Actually, yeah, we've just unpacked the van, and we've still got some of the beers that were left over from the apartment with the children at the beginning of the holiday that we'd never drank. They were back in our fridge in Yorkshire Dales.
And that's part of, again, the travelling mindset, that we try and keep as close to a home routine as we possibly can, because if we were going out for 5 weeks of skiing and hitting it hard like we were on holiday, I don't think we certainly wouldn't be in the state we are now. So yeah, we need to look after ourselves, but it's also another way of saving a few pennies. So a really popular slot on these budgeting videos that we've done in the past is the devil in the detail, where Jackie goes through her little black book. And she didn't have a little black book this time.
No, I didn't keep a detailed account of how much we spent on food and how much we spent on eating out. But I have gone through and collated all of the expenses. As we did say at the beginning, skiing is not a cheap holiday. You can do it on a budget of a sort, but it's never going to be something that is as cheap as just doing a normal European road trip. So our ferries were £236. The petrol that we put into the van came to £383 to get us back to the Dales. Tolls were £165 in total. We could have saved money, we could have gone the non-toll routes, but to be fair, in the middle of winter, it snowed on the way down, it rained most of the way on the way back. It's just easier to bomb up and down those toll roads, I think.
And one of the tips that we had from our drive down video, and thank you for this, eagle-eyed viewers spotted that on one of the tolls on the way down, we were charged as a class 2. That didn't happen on the way back because Jackie was obsessed with checking that we were class 1. And yeah, it meant that we paid what we were meant to pay.
A lot of people do say that we should get a bip and go, but actually we quite like the experience of going through the toll booths, and I like knowing exactly how much I've spent as it goes out of my account. Anyway, carrying on. The campsite, we had 23 nights on the campsite and it was £589 in total. That works out at about £25.60 a day. Really good value for your ski accommodation. The Art 1950 part of the accommodation that we had with the children was quite expensive compared to the campsite. We paid £750 for our portion of that accommodation costs, But we did stay in a really nice apartment. Obviously, we've talked already about the fact that you can't go skiing without your lift pass, and the lift passes was £1,379 for the two of us. When I looked at it, we both had the potential to ski for 28 days, and if we had skied those 28 days, it would have only cost us £25 per day. I think the actual cost if you bought a daily ski pass would have been about £65 each, so it is a really good value season pass. We, as I said, took out €1,200 in cash, which was £1,000 worth of euros, and that did last us for the whole of the holiday, which is really good in our cash is king. I had a little hospital visit, which I just wanted to highlight actually. We had our GHIC cards with us because you ski with them, and we had our passport identification. And because we had those two things with us, we only got charged £16.46. If you didn't have your GHIC card, you could probably have claimed any costs back from the NHS, but you would have had to pay an upfront cost at the hospital. And then we did go to the Folly Juice and we did have the pizza on the mountain, and both of those came to about £42. A couple of other little costs. We had to pay an excess of €107. We did that out of our cash budget actually for the windscreen, and we did go to Lake Annecy and we had a night in a little Airbnb because I was quite poorly and I couldn't ski, and we did get a really gorgeous little apartment, and it only came to £57, and that was including a €10 tourist tax, which I thought was quite extortionate, but that's a whole nother story. So a couple of broader figures. In total, we spent £3,998 for the campsite accommodation and all of our travel and all of our ski expenses. If we had stayed at the campsite for that extra week rather than being in an apartment, it would have cost us £4,177, which is actually less than £500 a week each skiing.
Which is really, really good. And you look on any website with any travel agent and you just would not be able to get a ski holiday for that price, because it did include all of our lift passes, which tend to get added on by tour operators. So yeah, it felt good value, but obviously the numbers are quite large because it was such a long trip.
Yeah, and actually because we obviously had the week with the children in ARC 1950, our total costs that we spent, including all of our spending money, all of the travel, everything, was £4,748. If you look at it a slightly different way, if we take £1,000 of that off the costs, because that's what we would have spent if we were living up in the Dales anyway, yeah, really good value. And actually, more than anything, we had the most amazing time.
So it feels a little bit that we've just sort of rambled on, but we do know from the comments that loads of people out there really value the devil of the detail in what we go through. And what we wanted to do is to just share with you some of our top tips for trying to moderate the costs of a skiing holiday. We absolutely love our ski experience. It is expensive, but it is possible to keep those costs under control.
So that's it from us, from all our different ski experiences over the last 5 weeks. We are back in the Dales. We have got most of the next couple of months in the Dales, and we'll be doing the odd little road trip to the lakes, and we want to really get up into the Northern Dales exploring, so watch out for those videos. But that's it from us for now. Bye.
Bye.